But I do believe in people voting with their feet, and I think if they can make the whole system more transparent around where the money goes, then I think people can make that choice. If they know that the money that they and their family and the local authority or NHS, whoever's going to be footing the bill, is going to be going offshore, that may make a difference as to where they actually ask to go to be housed or to be receive care. So I do think it's all about transparency and people voting with their feet at the end of the day.
So voting, relying on people voting with their feet is, it's a much more complex and risky strategy, I think. So I think I feel like we need to take more kind of direct regulatory action in order to prevent these sorts of structures, rather than these kind of, hoping that these strategies will kind of shape the sector differently.
It's human nature that people will sometimes get greedy if the checks and balances aren't in place to not allow them to do that. It's pure human nature. So yeah, I would regard regulation as something that's more of a conscience.
And I think this needs a massive rethink, a radical rethink at government level, to say, how are we going to encourage the creation of more not-for-profit and cooperative style care home providers? Now, one thing they could do to do that is to provide debt to those providers at reasonable interest rates, much in the same way as they fund student loans. This is all about radical rethink. It's about trying to come up with a new way of funding and setting up these care home providers. Doesn't mean that we close down all the private ones. That's where we need some regulation. Agree with that. We have the FSA that provides regulation over financial services companies to protect our money. Well, what about protecting our elderly?
The tax haven one is probably the most obvious thing to go for right now, because the public has more of an understanding of it. So I think that's great and should be one of the priorities, and should be something that's relatively simple to do. I mean, one of the stats from CHPI is that the sort of with tax haven accounts pay sort of 3 times more interest costs than anyone else in the sector. So, it's I think reasonable to assume that, as Andy said, they've only got those tax havens for one reason, and it is to hide profits, which means that profit is not going into frontline care.